the way the brain works, if it views something as like normal, then it's not intimidated or like scared by it. So whereas like if you view something as like going to be super hard or like something that's unattainable, then one, you're you know, as Tim Noakes would put it, like your central governor is gonna like shut your body down before it reaches that point of something that you thought was like too hard or unattainable or just like crazy.
Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. Through personal and professional connections in the running world, I have the privilege of getting to know some amazing athletes. I've always been fascinated by the psychological aspects of running and what helps people to achieve success, however they define it, and this podcast is aimed at exploring this and much more. I hope you enjoy. This episode is brought to you by Freedom Solar Power. When I first started looking into solar, I thought it would be a clunky and expensive process. I've learned it isn't nearly as hard as you think. Freedom Solar Power makes it simple. They provide a turnkey solution that is focused on educating their customers on the experience from installation to everyday use and savings. They ensure you have all the information needed to make sure going solar is right for you. From firsthand experience, it makes sense both financially and for the environment. With no down payment required, solar not only adds immediate value to your home, but it's also great for the environment and might even provide immediate savings, not to mention the year-end tax benefits, a credit of 26% this year. Freedom Solar operates in Texas, Colorado, Virginia, and Florida, and there are plenty of other great options nationwide. Thank you to Hydro for sponsoring this episode. Hydro is an immersive workout experience designed to bring the physical, mental, and emotional experience of on-water rowing straight to your home. Hydro workouts are quick, efficient, and low impact. Rowing for just 20 minutes a day provides you with a full body workout, which engages 86% of your major muscle groups. For context, cycling engages 44%. Head to hydro.com to check them out. That's HYDROW.com to learn more. Be sure to use the code FTLR100 to save $100 on your order. This episode is brought to you by Gooder. Gooder has the slickest shades around for only $25 and $35. They don't slip or bounce, and they stay on my face way better than more expensive sunglasses do. If you'd like to support me and the show, treat yourself to a pair or two or three of Gooders and head over to gooder.com and get 15% off your entire order with the code FTLR. That's 15% off at gooder.com, code FTLR. Your face will thank you. This episode is brought to you by Revel Race Series. Revel is an incredibly fast and remarkably beautiful series of full and half marathons that take place in the most scenic U.S. locations. All the races feature a fast downhill slope and spectacular scenery. Their next race takes runners from the canyons of the Wasatch Mountains to the foothills of Salt Lake City, Utah on September 10th for the 10-year anniversary of Revel Big Cottonwood. Register at runrevel.com with code FTLR for $10 off. And welcome back. I have CJ Albertson joining me on the podcast today. CJ, thanks for taking some time to chat.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So first question, who is CJ?
I don't know. I'm just a typical guy, I guess, that lives in Fresno, California. I'm a cross-country and track and field coach at Clovis Community College. And yeah, I'm a professional marathon runner for Brooks Running.
Awesome. And how did you get into running?
Started in fourth grade. I ran at my elementary school. We just had like a little 8-week cross-country season, then like 6-week track season. I was a kid that just basically did every sport. And so, yeah, just got into running from elementary school. And then I had success at it and I really loved it. So I just continued through junior high, through high school, through college. And, now I'm still running.
And so things have changed a little bit, I think, since your runs in fourth grade. At what point did you realize you might be pretty good at this?
Probably after the first race. In fourth grade, I did win my first race. So I thought that I would be good. But I think when I got into high school, I realized that like I was actually good because you could have, I think it was Diced at the time, kept like national lists. And so my freshman year, I was second on the national 1,600 meter list. So, finishing the year with the second fastest time for your class, that's when it was kind of put on a national scale.
And again, I'm sure a lot of things have changed between then and now. What did that progression look like?
I think in the beginning of my running career, I had a pretty steady progression. I think, elementary school is elementary school, but junior high, I was pretty good, like one of the best junior high runners. Like I ran 4:44 in seventh grade, then 4:39 in eighth grade. Freshman year, I dropped to 4:19, and then sophomore year was 4:12. These are all mile times. And then junior year, I had some injuries, but still ran 4:11. And then my senior year of track is when I had some struggles and I went on this like 2.5 year running slump where I didn't PR in any event and was running significantly slower than I did my junior and senior year of high school. And then around like my third year of college, things kind of started to pick back up again. I started PRing again. I ran 13:50 in the 5K and 8:45 in the steeplechase. So kind of progressed to some solid times, not like, not professional or world class by any standards, but, solid collegiate times. Yeah. And then I graduated and I was done as a professional runner, and just kind of moved on to normal life and started teaching and coaching. And then I just decided to run a marathon just kind of for fun. And training went really well. I ran a solo 2:17 and qualified for the Olympic trials. So then it was like, then all of a sudden, like my running career, or it wasn't a career yet, but my running, whatever you want to call it, kind of started picking back up again. And I started training more seriously and got better over the next year, ran 2:13 the next winter at CIM, and then ran 2:11 and placed seventh at the Olympic trials, which is when I, got into like becoming a professional.
So you ran 2:11, 2020, and 2:10 this past marathon. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was 2:10:23 at Boston.
And you had a really interesting Instagram post recently. I want to bring it up and read a couple of words from it. You said 2:10:23 at the Boston Marathon today. A few years I would have thought that was a fantasy, but things have changed, and today was incredibly disappointing. Good thing crazy people have short memories. One of the things I love most about the sport of running is that like what was once unattainable or really hard becomes tangible and accessible and then eventually easy. And I'm not saying 2:10 is easy. I'm saying that like when you ran that 2:17, maybe 2:10 seemed impossible. When you're running these times that so few people are running, even shaving 30 seconds is huge. And so we talked before we started recording about extrapolating this for amateurs, right? We don't have to be able to run OTQ paces to understand. For me, it was all about breaking three, and it was a challenge to break three for 4 years. And the journey of breaking three was like more fun than breaking three itself, because that ended up just being the like icing on the cake of a really strong build. So I'm curious for you, like first, how did you approach the concept of like I want to get better and here's what better looks like, or did you establish tangible goals, or was it more along the lines of like let's see how far we can go?
I think, well, when I first started, like when I trained for my first marathon, there were very little tangible goals. Actually, there weren't any to start with. I just started training, just started running. I don't really like to run slow. It's boring to me. And so my training was just naturally, I ran hard. And I think about 5 weeks into my marathon training, I ran a 2:21 marathon just in training around my park. And I remember thinking, I hadn't been looking at my watch the whole run, so I didn't actually know what pace I was running. I was just going out and running. And then when I finished, I was like, wow, I think I may have to set a goal of hitting the OTQ mark, because if I
You
can
just
run
jogged at
2:20,
2:21.
I didn't jog. I mean, I ran hard, but
Yeah.
but it was like if I just ran 2:21 here, like I should definitely be able to hit the OTQ mark fairly fairly easily, especially since I'm only 5 weeks into training. So, and then from there, yeah, I mean, it's hard. It was hard. I think it was hard to set goals because you really have no idea where you're going to be. And so I remember at one point thinking, yeah, I'd ran 2:17 and I was like, I probably could have ran faster, like, because I ran completely by myself. The course was a little long. I was thinking I could probably run like 2:15. But I also remember thinking like if I ever ran 210, like, under 5 minute pace, like that would be it. Like I could be, I could finish my career and be like good with that. Like I thought maybe I could, but it still seemed like pretty fast. Like it just cognitively seemed really fast. Um, so yeah, I don't know what really goals I had. I mean, obviously like I was in the Olympic trials, so I wanted to make the team, but it was also like making an Olympic team was so far out of reach from anything I had done before that it was kind of hard to set that tangible goal because it just everything I'd done in my life made that goal not really realistic up until that point. Like I mean I had done some good training and ran a 213, but but being top 3 in America is a different level, I think. And so yeah, I didn't have super specific goals. I just kind of just kept running and training the way that seems to work for me. And then yeah, I mean, I think in training is where I really broke down a lot of walls because you start running like sub 5:10 pace for long runs, or over a like for 20 whatever miles. And yeah, so then you're like, oh, okay, well, 5 minute pace, that's only like 7-8 seconds a mile faster. Like that seems pretty reasonable now. And so just like I think it was just kind of the week by week, my long runs would just get, a few seconds faster per mile a week. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, like if I taper and run in a race with actual people around me, another 5 to 10 seconds is pretty realistic. And so it's like now all of a sudden these times they're just what I'm going to run. So yeah, it is kind of crazy how it's all like happened because in a way there hasn't been as much structure to it as maybe you would think. And not as much intentionality as maybe you would think. It just kind of, not that it just happened, but it kind of just did.
So when you were grappling with you said something around like your training and racing previously didn't indicate that 210 was a reasonable goal. How did you rectify that? Did you sort of just compartmentalize it and say, I don't care, I'm going to get after it and see what happens?
No, I think I was saying the tangible goal of being top 3 at the Olympic trials was at the time, or maybe not at the race, but like 6 months before the race. That seemed like maybe not quite like a realistic, goal to have, because I seemed so far off that. Once I got within a few weeks of the race, I was like, it kind of seemed more realistic just because my training had gone so well. But yeah, I'm more talking like specifically for the Olympic trials. When I ran 210 at Boston, 207, 208 seemed realistic on a flat course. Boston's hard to judge what time you'll run. It's just a course that you have. I mean, time is just super hard to guess your time. But I for sure thought 208, 209 was possible at Boston, and not even possible, just realistic. Like it was just like what I was going to run, and it was what I was going to run up until 4 miles to go. So. Yeah, but yeah, my views on 210 leading up to Boston were that was already like I wasn't 210 wasn't even my goal because that seemed slow. But it is crazy, like just in a few years, how much that's changed. Because back in 2019, yeah, 210 would have seemed pretty fast, but by January of 2020, 210 wasn't really that fast anymore.
Isn't it cool how that works?
Yeah.
So how do you think about goals? Do you think about, are you a process versus outcome kind of a guy, or are you more outcome versus process?
I think everyone likes to say their process, versus outcome, but but then once you get to the race and after the race, everyone's outcome. You can do all the process right, and if the outcome sucks, you know, everyone's at least part outcome because we have outcomes and we're measured on outcomes. And most of our satisfaction comes from the outcome. It's just how it is, especially when you're competing and there's money involved, there's status involved, there's trying to make teams involved. Like that's just how it is. So, but yeah, I mean, process is a big part. And I think part of my improvements has been that I've tried to not really focus on like all of that stuff, like, all the things that go around with professionally running. I just try to train like just like any kind of person would just, they would just train and try to get a little bit better each season. And then, and then you run the time that you run, and then you get a little bit better. And then you run the time that you run, and then you get a little bit better. And so I've tried to just keep it like that. And I've gotten a lot better. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the season, or at the end of like when I have a race, it's like I am emotionally affected by those outcomes and by those race results for sure.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, right? Because so I was obsessed with breaking 3, and I was in a group of friends where like I ran my first marathon in 3:35, and I was like, that was slow. Everyone around me is running under 3. So I am not a good runner unless I can break 3, and that was like something I needed to figure out why I was saying that and get it out of my head. And it wasn't until I did that it actually happened. And so I was like obsessed with the outcome. And I didn't achieve that outcome until I was at peace with not getting it. And I lined up for that marathon that day, and I was like, I could see a 2 in front of the race time. I could see a 3. I didn't want to see a 4, but it was sort of like a disconnect from the outcome, and then I celebrated the hell out of the outcome when it happened. And it's so fascinating to hear, right? Like I've had so many conversations with professional athletes, and many have taken the similar opinion that you've shared, which is we like to say it's process, but we're dedicated to achieving tangible results because that's what pays the bills and that's what keeps us in the game. And so I'm curious, how do you rectify that, and how do you stay focused on, as you said, like string together season after season, and that's how you get better? And I'm also wondering, how does a family that you now have and a full-time job affect that as well? Do you feel that's a positive or a benefit that you have compared to your competitors that may not have as much structure in their life?
Yeah, so I think going back to the first part, I think how you interpret the outcome plays a big role, because even if you're process oriented, you're process oriented with some outcome in mind. So then when you finish, you're going to view your result, based on whatever that outcome is. Even if it was a loosely structured outcome, there was still some, you didn't go into it just, oh, I'm just gonna just, like
Go
there's
for
always
jog.
something in mind of what you want to accomplish. So I think like let's say I had like a goal of, I didn't actually have a specific goal for Boston, because I understand how the race works and how it goes, and there's no way to really predict what time you're going to run, because I mean, if you look at Boston results throughout the years, I mean, they're all over the place. But yeah, I mean, obviously I would have liked to have run like 208, 209, somewhere around there. But when I look at like how the race played out, it's like if I just look at the end result and I'm like, okay, I didn't hit this time, so it wasn't good. It's like, well, I'm not really doing a good job of analyzing like the race itself, because like really when you break the race down, I did everything that I intended to do, and I had the race, going out at the pace that I wanted it to. We went through halfway right where I was prepared to run, like right what I anticipated it would be, partly because I made it that pace, but but I mean it was there. And then I pushed on mile 16 on the downhill where I wanted to. None of the guys went with me, which I kind of wanted them to, but they at least had to run. They at least had to run hard up the hill to catch me, and I wasn't dropped on that first uphill in the Newton Hills, so I was able to stay with the leaders, which was part of my goal. I made it with them up the Heartbreak Hill, and I was in the lead starting the downhill section to the finish. And all those things were things that I wanted to do in the race. And I was on pace for I was on pace for like 208.50 or something with like 4.5 miles to go. And so literally almost the entire race was like exactly what my goal, if I had specific goals, was kind of what I wanted the outcome to be. I had, some cramping in my calves and hamstrings, so it finished bad, really bad. But I could still see how close I actually was to that goal. It wasn't like 2:10:23 was the absolute fastest that my body could have gone that day, because it was like I was running the like everything was there to run faster, just all fell apart at the end, which happens in marathons. So I think interpreting it from that way, it's like, okay, it wasn't a great feeling, and I was pretty disappointed for a while, maybe still a little bit. I mean, I'm not like mourning over it. It's been 3 weeks, but like it still like kind of stings a little bit. But so I can have those kind of down feelings, but still interpret the results as like it was the process was good. I was in really good shape. I performed well. It just the end didn't finish it didn't finish the way that it could have and that I wanted it to.
What'd you learn from that?
I'm not entirely sure yet. I think I have to experiment with some strength training exercises and because like figuring out why you cramp in a marathon's difficult, and I think people like to have answers, so they just try to simplify and be like, oh, it's like hydration or electrolytes or something, and it's like maybe, but probably not actually, because like if you have electrolyte imbalances, like you would have way more issues than just like a specific muscle doesn't contract and relax optimally. Like so I think there's like, it's more just like the neuromuscular fatigue of, constant eccentric and concentric contractions when your muscles are also like breaking down. So I think that's a lot more likely. And given that other elite runners, that happens to the same thing. It's not like they were all just like dehydrated because it wasn't even hot or, so I think figuring out why that happened and what I can do to prevent it. Cause like mileage wise, I think I run enough, and I do long runs hard enough. But I think there's
No, you don't.
specific muscular things. Yeah. There's specific muscular things that maybe I can do to make myself even more sturdy, I guess, or unbreakable. But yeah, I mean, all in all, I think the biggest thing I learned is that I can run with the top runners. And I felt like there was even times, like if you go back and look, like right when mile 16 started, the eventual winner, Evans Trebek, goes to make a move and try to gap some people. And he alludes to it in an interview that he had tried to go a few times, but kind of couldn't. And so that's when he made his eventual winning move around mile 23. But it was like part of why he didn't gap anyone was because I was right there. And then I put in a move by him. So it was like, I mean, this is one of the best guys ever. And I don't know. I don't know if this is true, but I'm interpreting it as he was struggling to drop me. So, I mean, I'm going to take it as some encouragement.
So is that a way to pull a positive and something you can carry forward into future races? Like, does something like that a guy who's one of the best couldn't pull one over on you? Like, do you take that and think about
he
that
eventually did,
in the next race?
but it was
sure. But you
took
gave
a few
him
tries.
Yeah, you gave him you didn't give it away, and you made him fight for it and really earn it.
Yeah, I mean, I think just I've wanted to be able to actually race, the people that are the best, and I feel like you can be in the race but not really racing. I feel like this was a big step towards racing. I was really disappointed because I wanted to be able to race the last 4 miles because that's when it counts, because that's where the finish line is. So it was like I wasn't racing there. I was just in the race trying to finish. And so that was the most disappointing part, was that I didn't get to compete when it actually mattered, which is the home stretch,
Yeah, all those Strava segments that you won along the way. It's all about the finish.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think, but it was, even more because last year when I ran Boston and I had the lead for 20 miles, it was different. Like I was never battling with guys. Like it was just, they kind of let me go and then they caught me. And then I was able to race the last 5 miles, and that was really cool. But it was like, but then I only had to race them for 5 miles and they had run like 2 minutes faster over a period of like 7 miles to catch me. So it was like, I kind of had a head start. So this race was like, okay, now we're just going straight heads up. And like, I was able to race most of the guys for most of the race. And so leading forward, it's definitely, it makes it fun because like, it's like, okay, I can race.
What's going through your head when you're leading or challenging guys like that, and maybe you're at your red line and that's approaching the limit of your physical capabilities?
I think when you're in the race, you never really think it's your red line, because if you're racing, if you're doing a good job of mentally racing, even if you're physically you're never really physically at your red line in a marathon, because you're almost always running slower than threshold pace.
Right.
And it's not like you're never like, because you can always cross your
Meaning
threshold pace and
you're
then
at
max out your,
you're like at you have like a specific amount of energy to exert. And if you go above pace, you exert it too early, right? So knowing that you're around your marathon effort capacity while racing a marathon is maybe a better way to phrase that
I don't
question.
really view I think, I don't know how to describe this, but I don't view the marathon like that. Because in my mind, there's no view of fatigue. There's no model of fatigue that makes sense of like why you would slow down. Because like I don't understand why I can't run like 1 second per mile slower than lactic threshold pace for the whole race, so long as it's not hot and I have ample glycogen. And I've trained my body so that my muscles aren't breaking down. So basically, like, because most people break down, and so like if your lactic threshold pace starts at 440 pace, by the end of the race, maybe it's like 455 because you're just working so inefficiently that the same amount of energy, um, or it requires
Cost
more
more.
energy to run
Yeah.
a certain pace because you're just less efficient. So I think, but if you train that and you can keep your efficiency almost at 100%, then theoretically you can run really, really close to lactate threshold pace for all the race and even cross lactate threshold pace like you would in a 10K and hold fairly high lactate levels the last few miles. So it's like I just have this view, and I feel like if you can maximize training and like maximize your resistance to fatigue and like train yourself to run a marathon like that, then yeah, I'm never at my red line because I know I'm not running faster than threshold. Like I can feel it. So I'm just not at my red line. Like I can, and then, but anyways, going back to the mental thing, mentally, regardless of what's happening physically, like I'm thinking, okay, it's mile 13. Like I know what I'm gonna do. I know what moves I'm gonna make at mile 16. I know what I'm gonna try to do at mile 20. So I'm thinking down the road of what I'm gonna do. And like if you're thinking that you're redlining at mile 10, you can't do any of that down the road because you're not gonna be there. Like you're gonna fall off pace or whatever. So like if you're having this thought that like, I mean, there are times when you are pushing too hard and you have to be like, okay, this is too fast. I gotta back off so that I can do this later. But for the most part, I'm not really thinking about that, and I'm not checking my splits too closely, being like, oh, 445, that's faster than my marathon effort capabilities, so I gotta slow down or whatever. Like that never crosses my mind. And people would argue, well, maybe it should, but it's like no, because it's a race, and so yeah, my mindset's just thinking. It's thinking into the future of the race, and it's prepared. It's always prepared to run the last mile fast. So there's never a thought of like I'm redlining here because it's like I'm gonna run the last mile super fast. Obviously, that didn't happen this race, but it's not a perfect mindset. But
So is that why your long runs look the way they look?
well, I think they look the way they look, partly because of that. Yeah, it fits into my model, but also part of the reason I believe the model is because my long runs aren't super difficult. Like if I run like this year, so my times change, as I get fitter. But in this specific training block, when I was at my most fit, when I was running like 505 pace, it was like I could run that all day. Like it was really, really comfortable. And so if I did, like a 25-mile run at like 505 to 510 pace, like that would be a very chilled day. And like people aren't even really going to believe that, but like it is. It's not a hard run. Like it just because I'm running a distance that isn't too challenging for me. I'm running a speed that isn't challenging for me. I have more than enough glycogen storage. The weather wasn't hot because it was early spring, late winter. So there was no reason for me to fatigue, and it's a comfortable pace. Like I've just ran it so much time that biomechanically I'm efficient at that pace, and it's just a very comfortable pace. So like a run like that wouldn't be hard, but then people look at it on like Strava or whatever, and they're like, wow, he just like runs crazy hard. Like it's just like these like efforts that they can't even like fathom, like maybe mentally and physically, but more like the mental. I think they think the mental side is crazy. Like I'm like, redlining for like 2+ hours every week in my long runs. But it's like in reality, like I wake up, I do my little pre-run stuff. but half the time I'm like half asleep. And then I warm up a mile. Like I literally only warm up like 5 or 6 minutes and just kind of like do some like really mediocre drills, maybe a stride or two, and then just roll into my run. And it's like, I don't know, it's just not that hard. But it's partly because I've done it so many times. And so like, that's just how, I mean, I've probably done like 100 long runs like this before. And they've all been, even since college, they've been like on the faster side relative to what people think a long run should be.
What does the day after a run like that look like?
Just normal. I mean, in this training block, there was one run, I ran like 24 miles at like, I don't remember what pace, like in the 5.0s or something, but my last 4 miles were really fast. And then the next day, oh no, maybe that was a 5.02 pace one. I don't know. I ran something pretty fast and like it was 24 miles. And then the next day I had some extra time because I don't know, my coaching schedule was a little bit different. So I ended up running 20 miles and like finished at 5:20 just because it just kind of happened. And like, but I felt perfectly normal. The day after, so I ran like the local marathon race of like around 5-minute pace or slightly under.
Wait, the day after?
No. This was like a week or two after. But like then I doubled 8 miles in the afternoon. And then the next day I doubled and I had a little soreness. Like I wouldn't go like smash like mile repeats or anything. But I mean, it feels, I don't know, it feels fairly normal.
What does an easy day look like for you?
Usually I'll just do 2 easy runs. So the morning, I don't know, could be anywhere from like 8 to 14 miles. The afternoon, maybe like 6 miles or so. I mean, some days I'll run less, like a real easy day, like maybe I only run 5 miles for the day. And that's more, usually it's not physical fatigue. Like I'm not like sore, nothing hurts. It's just, I'm just mentally and like life-wise tired. So it's just like, I just gonna play around.
If you've been enjoying this podcast and can spare 90 seconds of your time today, can you do me a favor? Can you pop over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review? It helps other people find and enjoy the podcast too. Thanks so much. Thanks again to Freedom Solar Power for supporting this episode of the podcast and our environment by providing an easy, green energy source. The buying process was fascinating and eye-opening, and I am excited to pay my learnings forward. If you're curious about going solar in your home, message me on Twitter or Instagram, and I'd be happy to help your journey by providing some great resources. Freedom Solar is a full-service solar company that's been installing solar panels and backup power systems since 2007. They operate in Texas, Colorado, Virginia, and Florida. Not in any of those states? Don't fret, my parents have the same panels from SunPower that were installed by a different company in Massachusetts. SunPower is the best in the business, and that's what Freedom Solar uses. I've enjoyed working with the whole team over at Freedom Solar, and I'm sure you will too. Thanks again to Hydro for supporting the podcast. I've been enjoying my Hydro to fit in bonus cardio that doesn't take much time at all, as even a 10 to 15 minute row feels like a solid workout. It's a fun experience to be able to row on familiar routes or explore new ones on the water. Head to hydro.com, that's HYDROW.com to learn more. Be sure to use the code FTLR100 to save $100 on your order. Thanks again to Gooder for supporting this episode. I have a few different styles of shades, and I've been loving them on runs or while at the pool. At $25 a pop, you can leave a pair in your car so that you'll never be without some shades. You can feel good about your purchase too, as 1% of Gooder's annual gross sales, not profits, go directly to environmental nonprofits working towards making our world a better place. If you'd like to support me in the show, treat yourself to a pair or 2 or 3 of Gooders and head over to gooder.com and get 15% off your entire order. That's 15% off at GOODR.com with the code FTLR. Your face will thank you. Revel Race Series is an incredibly fast and remarkably beautiful series of full and half marathons that take place in the most scenic U.S. locations. All the races feature a fast downhill slope and spectacular scenery. Their next race takes runners from the canyons of the Wasatch Mountains to the foothills of Salt Lake City, Utah on September 10th for the 10-year anniversary of Revel Big Cottonwood. Featuring a speedy downhill slope and spectacular scenery, this race will be sure to help you set your PR and finally hit that BQ time, as it's the fastest marathon and half marathon in the state of Utah. Register at runrevel.com with code FTLR for $10 off until July 31st. Do you think going beyond the marathon distance has helped marathoning?
I think so. I mean, you have to, like in every other event, you run longer than your race. I mean, besides ultras, but like you think about training for the 5K, the 10K, the half marathon, it's like that wouldn't even be a question. Like, of course you run longer than your distance because you're going to race your distance. Like if you're going to run as hard as you possibly can at a distance, how can you not be able to run more than that distance? Like it doesn't make any sense, right? Like, of course you're going to run more than your distance. So why people never do that for the marathon? I don't know. I think I've done less over distance my past couple build-ups than I've maybe wanted to. And I feel like, I don't know that it's hindered me because I've been in really good shape, but I think in the future I want to do a little bit more over distance on land. Because like when I run on the treadmill, it's like the over distance doesn't count really because the treadmill is just really, I don't know, the impact just feels so much lower that it's like, it's almost like biking. People won't agree with that either, but it's just like I could run forever on a treadmill, and
We're full of hot takes on this one. I think it's hard
yeah.
to run more than 5 miles on a treadmill.
Well, mentally, but like physically, like the impact is different.
Yeah.
You don't like your body isn't going to be as beat up. Like if you run 30 miles, if I run 30 miles on the treadmill, even I ran 50K. Before I set the 50K world record, the week before I ran 50K on the treadmill, and I felt not like the day after I felt nothing. It was like I didn't even run. So there's just something, but I was definitely sore after the regular 50K. So there's something, the treadmill just, maybe just the Peloton treadmills, I don't know, maybe they're just superior, but there's just there's for sure less impact. And I haven't done anything to prove that, but I think other people have, but yeah.
So when you're on a treadmill and running a 50K versus when you're racing a marathon, how do you keep your mind engaged? And the reason I'm asking is because a lot of people struggle with running on a treadmill. They have a family, so they need to, or it's raining and they want to, things like that. And so I think it's valuable to hear from people like yourself who are able to run long distances and run fast on a treadmill. So I'm curious, like, how do you do it and stay engaged?
Yeah, I no, it's definitely challenging. And I think there's no like one way for me because it's about being like mentally stimulated. So I have to like switch it up because like it's not like one thing will work every time because yeah, it does. I mean, it's monotonous for sure. But yeah, so sometimes I mean I've watched movies, different shows. Sometimes I don't watch any TV. Sometimes I have Zwift on there. Sometimes I have like Peloton classes, like just like a series of Peloton classes going. Sometimes I just have like well, I always have music, but different types of music. I don't think it was 50, but one of my real long ones, like I listened to like sermons. It was on a Sunday. I mean, so just like every time it's a little bit different, but I have like lots of different things that, keep you occupied. Yeah. So definitely music though. I have to like, I normally don't listen to music. Like when I run regularly, I never listen to music, but when I'm on the treadmill, you got to have some good music. And then, yeah, some sort of visual thing, whether it's Peloton, Zwift, or like a movie or TV.
Cool. On a similar note, curious about your ability to balance elite level marathoning with everything else you have going on in life. Do you find that that's beneficial? Is it a challenge that you've been working on? How does that factor in?
I think it's definitely beneficial. Like during COVID, when we were still working, but it was different, and I had more time. I wasn't able to train as well. So I just think like the structured like interaction is good for me. But I think the difference is just like I can't necessarily do it like 50 weeks a year. Like so I can't be training at a super high level and doing everything like most of the weeks of the year because it just I'll get run down. Like it just like I can't do it. But when I have blocks of like 10 to 12 weeks, then I just get in this routine. I get in this schedule of like I do my running here. I teaching and coach like everything's just kind of like set up and like I do have to be flexible on some days, but like it's just kind of like I can be busy and like fit it all in like in that time frame. And it's like you kind of just like get in this rhythm of doing everything. I don't think the rhythm is sustainable for like years on end, but when it's only 10 to 12 week blocks, like I can do it and I can do it at a fairly high level. But then I have to have maybe more downtime, I guess, than other people. Maybe when it comes to running, not and like it's not like I'm not running, but more times where it's not like super structured training. Um, and then for the marathon, since you don't race super often, that works because it's like you have a few big races a year, and so you don't have to be training like super super hard all year round. And it's probably not even healthy. I mean, like I think your body, yeah, I think hormonally you may benefit from not running real high mileage every week of the year.
And how does being a dad impact life and training?
Um, yeah, that's kind of the same thing. I feel like you have like for like those blocks of time, like my wife will like know that I'm training for a big race. So some of the like parently duties, she's gonna help out, or she's gonna not help out, basically be the sole provider for a lot of those. But then when I'm not in a marathon, it's like the roles maybe change a little bit. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's also so new. Like, I mean, I've only been a parent for 6 months, so I've only had one marathon build to go off of, and I'm sure the next build will be different. And then when we have multiple kids, like that will be completely different. So I don't really feel like I have the experience to adequately answer that, I mean, for Boston, it worked. But I think each time will be different, and you just kind of have to figure it out as you go.
Cool. If you could go back and talk to the CJ who hadn't yet run a marathon, what would you say?
Probably nothing, because I feel like the my experience or like the way things happen like were good, and I think maybe if I knew what would happen, I would have like thought about it too much or like tried to make it happen too much, and so yeah, I probably wouldn't say anything.
Just feel the things and experience it, right?
Yeah.
So now instead of going back, let's look ahead 10 years. What are you really proud of accomplishing?
Um, I don't know, because the things that I thought I'd be proud of accomplishing a few years ago, I feel like I'm not even proud of now. Yeah, I mean, I really don't know.
But isn't that cool, right? Like the
Yeah.
things that used to be on a pedestal or used to be like really unattainable or far away, like you've done those and
Yeah, it
moved
seems
on.
like everything kind of not necessarily, but like everything's coming into the realm of being possible. So it's like there's still things that are like, okay, it's probably not going to happen, but like it's kind of like approaching that realm now. Because like when I was running in Boston, there were segments of the race. I look back at my watch and we were running like low 440s, but like I didn't even I didn't look at my watch in those miles, so I didn't know we were running that fast. But and like some of them were even on some uphill miles, so I was like, I didn't think I could just kind of like casually run like low 440, like 442, like that's like 203 pace. So then I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I've gotten so much better. Like in a few years, will low 440s just be like normal? Like, I mean, it felt normal in the race. Obviously, we didn't hold that the whole time, but so like that doesn't even seem out of the realm of possibility now. So, I mean, realistically, like I know it is far away, but it also doesn't feel like that. So.
So you sort of backed into an answer that was the first answer I ever got to that question. I asked Vanessa Fraser almost 200 episodes ago, what would you be really proud of in 10 years? And this was the first time I asked this question to an athlete at that level. And her answer was like, I don't know, just getting better. And I was expecting her to say, win an Olympic medal or something tangible of that nature. And you've essentially described it in the same way as like maybe things that seem unattainable become normal and attainable. And my analysis or like meta analysis, I guess, of hearing this 100 plus times is like that's what breeds success. That's what creates success. That you're able to strive for progress, not I want to run 203 or 205 or 207 or 209 or 20 whatever, 159. And I think it's super cool that like our minds work in that way that we don't need to attach ourselves to a tangible outcome, and we can instead focus on like I just want progress and to see where I can go.
Yeah, and I think there's a very like the way the brain works. If it views something as like normal, then it's not intimidated or like scared by it. So Whereas like if you view something as like going to be super hard or like something that's unattainable, then one, you're, as Tim Noakes would put it, like your central governor is going to like shut your body down before it reaches that point of something that you thought was like too hard or unattainable or just like crazy. And so like, because like physically, I mean, it's annoying when people say we don't have physical limitations because we definitely do. And the physical training is like, I mean, it's a huge part of it. But then there's also the thing of like, what does your mind perceive is normal, and like, what is it not going to be stressed by? So like when we're faced with stress, like obviously, like a little bit of physical stress is good. It signals our body to make all these adaptations. But then when we view things in a too stressful manner, then it's like that can be catabolic, and we're like in this stressed out state, and like we don't adapt appropriately, and like we're just in that catabolic state instead of producing the things to get us more in the anabolic building stage. So I think if you can, when things just become normal, like when Eliud Kipchoge is running, like winning to him is just like normal. So like when he's competing around other guys, eventually dropping them all is just it's a normal process of what's going to happen next. And so his brain is it's basically hardwired to like think like this is how the race is going to go. People are eventually going to drop off of me. So even if people are running faster, his mind doesn't perceive it as they're running fast because it's like, well, eventually I'm going to be running faster and drop them because that's just I don't know. That's just the pattern that we've learned. And so the brain's going to make it happen because that's just what's normal. And so part of any sport is you have to learn how to win, and winning has to become normal. I think for me, that's been hard because I haven't won big races really ever. I mean, I've never won a national
What about that
championship.
fourth grade mile?
No, yeah, I do have. I've won many times in my career, but at least on a stage like that. And so it's like, okay, so when I'm in Boston and I'm with the lead group, it's like before this wasn't normal. Like to be running with these 203 guys, like my brain knows like, okay, but at some point they're gonna drop you, and it's like, so then it's like, even if they don't do anything to physically warrant that, like, is your brain going to ramp the body down because it's like, well, you're not supposed to be here, and it's like you may not have that conscious thought, and like I didn't, but like it's still there because you've still lived your whole life and ran the times that you've ran and ran the races that you've ran. So how does it become normal? And so I think part of why it works, like if I was still impressed by 210, then like my brain would fight me to not run 210. But it's like if I get to a point where it's like I'm running 203 and like I look at 203 and it's like, oh man, that was whatever. But like I should have ran, like I could have ran 201, but like, it's just kind of like I just defaulted to 203. It's like that's the only way you run 203, or that's the only way that you consistently run it, is if your brain just thinks it's normal. And so it's hard to be in that place before you're there. It's almost impossible. And so it's like the question is, well, how do we get those breakthroughs? And people write books and stuff, but I don't know if we just kind of guess. I don't really know if we know, but yeah, it's an interesting thing. I think that's why when you ask these people, it's like, I think that's the reason why we're less impressed with our good performances after we've had them, but it's also a necessary trait to have, or else we wouldn't keep continuing to have those performances.
Well, it's like ego, right? And it's a protective mechanism that your central governor, your brain, your body, you've never done something, and in order to do something extraordinary, you have to go to a place you've never been before. I think I captioned my 259 marathon with that. Like, in order to do something you've never done, you need to go to a place you've never been. Also read that as fake it till you make it. Also read that as over distance. Anytime I talk to someone who's struggling with the marathon, I tell them that they should train and race a 50K because it puts the marathon in perspective. Yeah. And it puts a 2.5 hour long run in perspective when you're running 5 hour long runs to run a trail 50K that might take 5 hours plus. And so I think that there are these, I know that there are these tactics that you can take that it's not like tricking your brain into thinking you can do something, but it's like, it's stressing and it's initiating this adaptation mentally so that you can go to these places. And to me, that's the point of training, right? For the majority of people, we don't make money for running. And so we do it for fun. But we don't just do it for fun. We do it because it allows life to be easier, right? You hear all the time people are like, oh, my workout in the morning is the hardest, the hardest I'll work all day, and it makes everything else easier. I think there's so much to that, right? If you can voluntarily, nobody's making you run a 2:10 pace, a 2:10 marathon, a 2:09 marathon. You have a job, you have a family, like you don't have to do it. And so you're continuing to put yourself in a position of discomfort in order to grow and find out what you're made of and find out like how far you can go. But that's not siloed, right? Everything you learn in that arena and everything we learn in that arena is applied to every other aspect of life. I'm sure it's made being a father to a newborn easier. And so along those lines, but somewhat diverting a little bit, I'm curious your definition of success, because we've talked a lot about growth and mindset and overcoming barriers. But I'm curious for someone at your level trying to do the things that you're doing at the speeds you're doing it, what does success mean to you?
I guess, I don't know. I feel like success has a very dualistic sort of feel. Like it's either you're successful or you're not. But obviously, like a lot of things in life, especially like grand things in life, are they're just all like a spectrum. So like you can't really like define success because it's not like you either had success or you didn't. And I think even viewing something like that as in like I either failed or I didn't, or I was successful or I didn't, like I mean, sometimes it's practical. Like if you have a class and you get units, well, you either passed the class and got the units or you didn't. Like so that's very practical. Like but yeah, and running is not necessarily like that. So I don't put like a strict definition on success because again, like your career is like constantly changing. So like maybe success for me, like if I would have sat down and defined it, like running 210 probably would have been it. But it's like, but that's definitely not it now. And going into Boston, even like I hadn't actually even run 210 yet, but like 210 was definitely not the measure of success. It wasn't anywhere close. So it's really hard to define it, and I don't really want to or try to. It's just like in the grand scheme of things, it's like it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't matter that a whole lot. Like it is just for enjoyment. I mean, there's a money side to it, but for the most part, it's like just enjoyment, and I enjoy doing it. So I think it's just getting better, and then like analyzing like how I can manipulate my body to and my mind to run faster. And I think just continually figuring that out um, will lead to whatever I run. And like I don't know what I'm going to end up running. I don't know what I'm going to end up placing, but I don't know. You just kind of keep you look at things and then you see how you can get better, and then you try to do them.
I love that. You said something that I really liked. It doesn't matter. I saw a meme yesterday with two people sitting on a bus, and one has a thought bubble that says something along the lines of like, nothing matters, and the person is frowning and sad. And the other person, same thought bubble, same quote, nothing matters, and they're grinning ear to ear. It's like, this is just our interpretation. Everything is our interpretation, and like how we handle it is what matters. I had just completed rim to rim to rim, and I was sitting on the bus coming back from the South Rim, and I was eating a picky bar. And every time I tell this story, I say it, I'm eating a picky bar, because anyone who's eaten a picky bar knows how crunchy and loud those wrappers are. And the bus driver turns around and says, "No eating on the bus." And I said, "Sorry, ma'am, like I'm really hungry. I just ran 45 miles. She's like, "I don't care. No eating on the bus." And so it was the perfect epitome of like, I had just done the most substantial thing in my life from a physical standpoint and also from a mental standpoint. And here's a woman telling me, "I don't care. I'm
Yeah.
doing my job. I'm driving my bus. These are my rules." It's like, wow, okay. In the grand scheme of things, like who gives a shit?
Yeah, that is pretty funny.
So I think it's the perfect summary of like what you said. Like I had a conversation with Scott Fauble along the same lines, and he was like, if I don't PR, like my girlfriend will still love me and my family will still love me. And, it doesn't matter as long it's what you said, like, are you improving? Are you learning? Are you enjoying it? And that's what matters.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking some time to chat. I love on Brooke's website, it says, you can't catch CJ, but you can follow him. So if we want to follow you, where can we find you?
All my stuff is, I really only have Strava and Instagram, and they're both just CJ Albertson.
Awesome. Well, CJ, thanks for taking some time to chat, and we'll see you out there.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next time on For the Long Run, and in the meantime, happy trails. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too. This podcast and the accompanying music has been produced by Brian Walters of Single Track Sound. For the Long Run's logo was created by Vanessa Wolf of Sterling Wolf. Show notes have been written by Ruby Wiles and is managed by Emily Holland. It takes a village.